Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the bizarre world of medieval beauty secrets that would make your modern skincare routine look absolutely tame. Picture yourself standing in a 14th century apothecary shop, surrounded by jars filled with crushed pearls, vials of mercury, and yes, actual human urine. The air is thick with the scent of rosewater mixed with something decidedly less pleasant. And you're about to discover beauty treatments so extreme that you probably won't survive half of them with your eyebrows intact. You're witnessing an era where beauty wasn't just about looking good, it was about proving your social status, your wealth, and sometimes your willingness to risk death for the perfect complexion. These weren't your grandmother's cold cream recipes. These were concoctions that could literally poison you while promising to make you irresistible. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment below with your location and what time you're listening. I love seeing where in the world you're joining me for these sleepy historical adventures. Are you in Tokyo at sunrise? London at midnight? Let me know. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported back to medieval Europe, where the pursuit of beauty was literally a matter of life and death. The morning sun filters through narrow castle windows as noble ladies begin their elaborate beauty rituals, completely unaware that their quest for perfection might actually be shortening their lives. The medieval period, spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th centuries, was a time when beauty standards were as rigid as they were dangerous. You're entering a world where pale skin wasn't just fashionable. It was essential for proving you didn't work in the fields like a common peasant. The whiter your skin, the higher your social status, and people would go to absolutely terrifying lengths to achieve that coveted porcelain complexion. One of the most mainstream practices of the era was the use of white lead paint as foundation. Yes, you heard that right, lead paint. The same substance we now know causes severe neurological damage was once considered the height of sophistication. Noble women would slather this toxic mixture across their faces, necks, and even their décolletage, creating an otherworldly pale appearance that was considered breathtakingly beautiful. But here's where it gets really weird. Some women would actually eat small amounts of chalk and white clay to achieve that pale look from the inside out. They believed that true beauty had to radiate from within. Historians still argue whether this practice was more about internal purification rituals or genuine belief in edible cosmetics. But either way, it's a testament to how far people would go for beauty. The lead-based makeup wasn't just dangerous, it was actively disfiguring over time. Long-term use would cause hair loss, skin deterioration, and eventually death. But in a society where your appearance determined your marriage, prospects, and social standing, many women considered it a worthwhile risk. You can almost hear them reasoning, "Sure, I might die, but at least I'll be a beautiful corpse." Moving beyond the face, medieval hair care was equally bizarre and dangerous. The ideal medieval woman had a high forehead so high that many would pluck their hairlines back several inches to achieve the look. This wasn't just a few strategic tweaks. We're talking about creating what would essentially be male pattern baldness, but on purpose and considered gorgeous to maintain their remaining hair. Women would use a mixture of goose fat, lizard, tallow, and swallow droppings as a conditioning treatment. The smell alone must have been absolutely revolting, but apparently it worked wonders for achieving that coveted medieval shine. Some recipes even called for boiled hedgehog spines to be mixed into the concoction because nothing says beautiful hair like small mammal quills, right? Here's a quirky tidbit that might surprise you. Medieval women were obsessed with blonde hair, but bleaching technology was primitive at best. They would sit in the sun for hours with their hair soaked in a mixture of saffron, turmeric, and sometimes even sulfur. The sulfur method was particularly popular in Italy, where women would wear special hats with no crowns called solana that allowed them to spread their hair across the brim while protecting their faces from the sun. The eyebrow situation was perhaps even more extreme than the hairline plucking. The medieval ideal was to have virtually no eyebrows at all. Women would pluck every single hair, creating a smooth, unbroken expanse from their eyes to their hairline. Some would even use tweezers heated over candle flames to ensure they got every last stubborn hair. The pain must have been excruciating, but beauty demanded sacrifice. Historians still argue whether the eyebrow trend originated from religious influences. Some interpretations of Christian doctrines suggested that excessive hair was vanity, or if it was purely aesthetic. What we do know is that it was so popular that fake eyebrows made from mouse skin were actually sold in markets for women who had gone too far with their plucking. You're probably starting to realize that medieval beauty routines were less pamper yourself and more survive this ordeal. But we're just getting started. The lengths these women went to for perfect skin would make modern beauty influencers look absolutely reasonable by comparison. You wake up in a medieval manor house, and the first thing that hits you isn't the cold stone floors or the lack of central heating. It's the overwhelming smell of sulfur and rotten eggs wafting from the ladies' chamber. This isn't a plumbing problem. It's beauty day, and you're about to witness skincare routines that would make a modern dermatologist faint. The pursuit of perfect skin in medieval times wasn't just about looking good. It was about proving your moral character. People genuinely believed that physical beauty reflected spiritual purity, which meant that having clear, pale skin was literally a matter of salvation. No pressure there, right? You can imagine the stress of knowing that a single pimple might damn your soul for eternity. One of the most popular medieval skincare treatments was the use of mercury-based ointments. Mercury, that lovely liquid metal that we now know causes severe neurological damage, was considered a miracle cure for everything from wrinkles to age spots. Women would rub it directly onto their skin, sometimes mixing it with sulfur to create what they called virgin's milk, a name that's ironically appropriate since using it probably ensured you'd remain a virgin by killing you before marriage. The mainstream practice of using animal-based skincare was equally disturbing. Snail slime was considered the ultimate anti-aging treatment, and women would literally let live snails crawl across their faces to deposit their mucus. While modern science has actually proven that snail secretions do have some beneficial properties, the medieval application method was significantly less hygienic than today's refined, snail-based serums. But here's where medieval skincare gets really weird. Crocodile dung was considered the ultimate sunscreen and skin brightener. Wealthy women would pay enormous sums to have crocodile excrement imported from Egypt, which they would then mix with honey and apply as a face mask. The logic was that crocodiles spend all day in the sun without getting dark, so their waste must contain some kind of natural sun protection. The smell alone must have been absolutely horrific, but apparently it was worth it for that perfect, pale complexion. Historians still argue whether the crocodile dung treatments were based on genuine belief in their effectiveness, or if they were simply status symbols after all. If you could afford to import exotic animal waste for your beauty routine, you were clearly wealthy beyond measure. Either way, It represents the extreme lengths medieval women would go to for beauty. The concept of exfoliation existed in medieval times, but their methods were brutal by modern standards. Instead of gentle scrubs, women would use pumice stones, crushed shells, and even sand to literally scrape away dead skin. Some recipes called for mixing ground glass with honey to create what they believed was the ultimate skin-smoothing treatment. You can imagine how well that went, assuming you can imagine voluntarily rubbing glass shards on your face. For those who couldn't afford exotic ingredients, there were more accessible but equally dangerous alternatives. Urine was considered an excellent skin toner and acne treatment. Not just any urine, mind you, the urine of young virgins was considered the most potent. There were actually professional urine collectors who would go door to door collecting this precious commodity from suitable candidates. Talk about a job you definitely wouldn't put on your LinkedIn profile. The medieval obsession with removing body hair extended far beyond eyebrows and hairlines. A completely hairless body was considered the pinnacle of feminine beauty, and the methods for achieving this were nothing short of medieval torture. Women would use a mixture of resin, pitch, and sometimes even caustic lime to create primitive hair removal treatments that would burn the hair right off along with several layers of skin. One particularly popular hair removal method involved mixing cat's blood with vinegar and applying it to unwanted hair. The theory was that the acidity would dissolve the hair follicles, but more often than not, it just caused severe chemical burns. Some women would even use heated bronze tweezers to pluck individual hairs, a process that could take hours and left them with infected follicles and permanent scarring. Here's a quirky detail that shows just how far the hairless ideal went. Medieval women would even remove their eyelashes. They believed that eyelashes were a sign of lustful thoughts, so pious women would pluck them out completely. Special tiny tweezers were made specifically for this purpose, and there are records of women paying significant sums to have professional eyelash pluckers perform this delicate operation. The pursuit of the perfect medieval complexion also involved some truly bizarre dietary restrictions. Women were advised to avoid certain foods that were believed to cause skin problems, but the list was so extensive that it's a wonder they ate anything at all. Garlic, onions, leeks, and basically anything with flavor were forbidden because they were thought to cause bad breath and skin blemishes. Instead, medieval beauty experts recommended a diet of white foods, white bread, milk, white fish, and pale vegetables. The theory was that you literally became what you ate, so consuming only white foods would result in beautifully pale skin. Of course, this nutritionally deficient diet probably caused more skin problems than it solved, but logic wasn't exactly the strong suit of medieval beauty advice. You're starting to see a pattern here. Medieval beauty treatments were less about actual effectiveness and more about demonstrating your willingness to suffer for beauty. The more painful, expensive, or dangerous the treatment, the more beautiful you were considered to be. It was like an ancient version of no pain, no gain, except the pain was often permanent and the gain was questionable at best. You find yourself in the private chambers of a medieval noblewoman, watching in horrified fascination as she prepares for what she calls her beauty bath. The wooden tub before you isn't filled with the rose petals and essential oils you might expect instead. It's brimming with a murky mixture that smells like a combination of barnyard and apothecary gone wrong. Medieval bathing for beauty purposes was a complex ritual that could take days to prepare and hours to execute. The mainstream belief was that water alone was actually harmful to the skin, so most beauty baths involved little actual water and lots of other substances that would make modern spoggers run screaming from the building. One of the most popular medieval beauty bath recipes involved milk, honey, and wine, which sounds lovely until you realize they're talking about sour milk, fermented honey, and wine that's been sitting around for months. The fermentation process was believed to create magical properties that would preserve youth and beauty. Women would soak in these concoctions for hours, emerging with skin that was supposedly softer but definitely smellier. But here's where medieval bathing gets really strange. Many beauty baths included live animals. Small fish were often added to the bath water because their movement was believed to stimulate circulation and remove dead skin. Imagine trying to relax in a tub while dozens of tiny fish nibble at your toes, and this was considered the height of luxury. Some recipes even called for live eels, which were thought to have particularly powerful rejuvenating properties. The use of human breast milk in beauty baths was considered the ultimate luxury treatment. Wealthy women would pay wet nurses not just to feed their children, but to provide milk for their beauty routines. The belief was that breast milk contained the essence of youth and fertility, so bathing in it would transfer those properties to the bather. The logistics alone must have been a nightmare. Imagine being the servant responsible for collecting enough breast milk to fill a bathtub. Historians still argue whether these elaborate bathing rituals were based on genuine belief in their effectiveness, or if they were simply elaborate displays of wealth and status. What's clear is that the more exotic and expensive the ingredients, the more effective the treatment was considered to be. For those who couldn't afford breast milk baths, there were more accessible but equally bizarre alternatives. Buttermilk baths were popular among the merchant class, often enhanced with herbs that were believed to have magical properties. Rosemary for memory, lavender for love, and sage for wisdom were common additions, creating baths that were part beauty treatment and part spellcasting session. The medieval obsession with achieving perfect skin extended to some truly revolting practices. One popular treatment involved bathing in the blood of young animals, particularly lambs and calves, because their youth was believed to be transferable through their blood. The sight of a noble woman sitting in a tub of animal blood, calmly discussing the weather with her servants, must have been absolutely surreal. Here's a quirky detail that shows just how seriously medieval people took their beauty baths. There were professional bath preparers who specialized in creating these concoctions. These weren't just servants filling tubs with water, they were skilled artisans who knew exactly how to ferment milk to the perfect consistency, how to keep fish alive during transport, and how to blend various animal products to create the most effective beauty treatments. The temperature of medieval beauty baths was also crucial, but not in the way you might think. Hot baths were considered dangerous because they opened the pores too much, allowing evil spirits to enter the body. Cold baths were thought to shock the system and cause premature aging. The ideal beauty bath was lukewarm, just warm enough to dissolve the various ingredients, but not hot enough to cause spiritual contamination. Some medieval beauty baths included ingredients that were literally toxic. Lead-infused water was popular for its supposed skin whitening properties, despite the fact that it caused severe poisoning. Mercury was added to baths for its alleged anti-aging effects, slowly poisoning the bathers while they soaked in blissful ignorance of the danger. The ritual aspect of medieval beauty bathing was just as important as the ingredients. Women would often fast for days before their beauty baths, believing that internal purification was necessary for external beauty. They would pray during the bathing process, asking for divine intervention in their quest for perfect skin. Some even believed that bathing during certain phases of the moon would enhance the treatment's effectiveness. You're probably wondering how anyone survived these beauty treatments, and honestly, many didn't. The combination of toxic ingredients, unsanitary conditions, and dangerous practices meant that the pursuit of beauty was literally a matter of life and death. But in a society where your appearance determines your entire future, many women felt they had no choice but to risk everything for the chance at perfect beauty. The aftermath of these beauty baths was often worse than the treatment itself. The combination of fermented dairy products, animal blood, and toxic metals created the perfect environment for bacterial infections. Many women developed serious skin conditions from their beauty treatments, which they would then try to cure with even more dangerous remedies, creating a vicious cycle of beauty-related health problems. You step into a medieval monastery's herb garden, but this isn't your typical peaceful sanctuary of healing plants. This is where the most dangerous beauty ingredients in medieval Europe were cultivated plants, so toxic that even touching them could cause severe reactions. Yet they were considered essential for achieving perfect medieval beauty. The medieval understanding of botany for beauty purposes was a fascinating blend of genuine herbal knowledge and complete superstition. Monks and nuns, who were often the most educated members of society, maintained extensive gardens specifically for cosmetic purposes, growing plants that would make modern toxicologists break out in cold sweats. One of the most popular and dangerous medieval beauty plants was belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade. The mainstream use of belladonna was as eye drops to dilate the pupils, creating what was considered an irresistibly seductive look. The name belladonna literally means beautiful woman in Italian, which tells you everything you need to know about its intended purpose. Women would squeeze the juice directly into their eyes, achieving that wide-eyed, otherworldly appearance that was considered the height of beauty. Of course, belladonna is incredibly toxic, and using it as eye drops caused blurred vision, hallucinations, and sometimes permanent blindness. But hey, at least your pupils looked amazing while you were stumbling around unable to see properly. The fact that this practice continued for centuries despite its obvious dangers shows just how important physical beauty was in medieval society. Here's where medieval botanical beauty gets really weird. Women would also eat small amounts of belladonna to achieve a flushed, feverish complexion that was considered highly attractive. The slight poisoning would cause a rosy glow in the cheeks and a glassy-eyed look that was apparently irresistible to medieval men. It's like the ultimate natural blush, if you don't mind the risk of death. Another popular but dangerous beauty plant was white bryony, which was used to create skin whitening treatments. Women would grind the roots into a paste and apply it directly to their skin, despite the fact that it caused severe chemical burns. The resulting blisters and scarring were considered a necessary part of the beauty process you had to suffer to achieve that perfect pale complexion. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly understood the dangers of these plants, or if they simply accepted the risks as part of the beauty process. What's clear is that there were detailed instructions for using these toxic plants, suggesting that people were aware of their dangerous properties but chose to use them anyway. The cultivation of beauty plants was serious business in medieval times. Monastery gardens had entire sections dedicated to cosmetic herbs, with detailed records of planting schedules, harvesting techniques, and preparation methods. These weren't casual hobby gardens, they were sophisticated operations that supplied the beauty needs of the wealthy across Europe. One particularly bizarre medieval beauty plant was mandrake, which was believed to have magical properties that could enhance beauty and attract love. The root of the mandrake plant supposedly resembled a human figure, and it was thought that harvesting it would imbue the harvester with supernatural attractiveness. The harvesting process itself was incredibly dangerous, not because of the plant's toxicity, but because people believed it would scream when pulled from the ground, killing anyone who heard it. To safely harvest mandrake, medieval people developed an elaborate ritual involving dogs. They would tie a rope to a dog's tail, attach the other end to the mandrake root, and then make a loud noise to startle the dog into running and pulling up the plant. The dog would supposedly die from hearing the mandrake's scream, but the human harvester would be safe. Whether this actually worked is debatable, but it shows the lengths people would go to for their beauty ingredients. Here's a quirky detail about medieval beauty gardens. They were often arranged according to astrological principles. Different plants were associated with different planets and zodiac signs, and they had to be planted, tended, and harvested at specific times to maximize their beauty-enhancing properties. Venus plants were for love and attraction, moon plants were for skin whitening, and Mars plants were for probably something involving blood. Knowing medieval beauty trends, the preparation of botanical beauty treatments was almost as dangerous as using them. Many recipes required boiling toxic plants for hours, creating fumes that could poison entire households. Servants responsible for preparing these treatments often developed chronic health problems from constant exposure to toxic vapors, but this was considered an acceptable occupational hazard. Some medieval beauty plants were so dangerous that they were only available through special dealers who specialized in toxic substances. These weren't your friendly neighborhood herbalists. They were essentially medieval drug dealers who trafficked in beauty-enhancing poisons. The fact that such a trade existed shows just how desperate people were for effective beauty treatments. The seasonal availability of beauty plants created its own set of problems. Many of the most effective treatments could only be prepared during specific times of the year, leading to a kind of medieval beauty calendar where women would plan their skincare routines around plant harvesting seasons. Miss the belladonna harvest, and you'd have to wait an entire year for your next eye treatment. You're beginning to understand that medieval botanical beauty wasn't just about looking good, it was about demonstrating your knowledge of dangerous substances and your willingness to risk everything for the perfect appearance. The more toxic the plant, the more effective it was considered to be, creating a beauty culture that was literally built on poison. You find yourself in a medieval alchemist's laboratory, surrounded by bubbling cauldrons and mysterious apparatus that looks more like torture devices than beauty equipment. The air is thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metals, and you're about to witness the birth of what medieval people considered scientific beauty treatments procedures that would make modern cosmetic chemists question their life choices. Medieval alchemy wasn't just about turning lead into gold, it was also about transforming ordinary women into goddesses of beauty through the power of chemical manipulation. Alchemists were the medieval world's equivalent of cosmetic scientists, except their understanding of chemistry was based more on mysticism than actual science, leading to beauty treatments that were equal parts fascinating and terrifying. The mainstream alchemical beauty treatment was the creation of philosopher's powder, a mixture of ground pearls, gold dust, and various toxic metals that was believed to grant eternal youth when applied to the skin. The theory was that precious metals contained the essence of perfection, so rubbing them on your face would transfer that perfection to your appearance. The reality was that most of these treatments contained enough mercury and lead to slowly poison the user. But hey, At least they sparkled while they killed you. One of the most popular alchemical beauty procedures was the creation of virgins' water, a distilled liquid that was supposed to restore youthful appearance to aging skin. The preparation process involved distilling the urine of young girls with various herbs and metals, creating a clear liquid that women would splash on their faces like medieval toner. The fact that this was considered the height of sophistication shows just how different medieval beauty standards were from modern ones. Here's where medieval alchemy gets really weird. Alchemists believed that they could capture the essence of youth from young animals and transfer it to aging humans through topical applications. This led to treatments involving the distilled blood of lambs, the ground bones of young deer, and even the powdered hearts of doves. Women would pay enormous sums for these essence of youth treatments, believing that they could literally absorb the life force of young creatures through their skin. The alchemical approach to hair care was equally bizarre and dangerous. Alchemists created hair dyes using a combination of sulfur, lead, and various plant extracts that would not only change hair color but also cause severe scalp burns and hair loss. The most sought-after color was a golden blonde that could only be achieved through a process involving heated metals and caustic chemicals that would make modern hair colorists refuse to work. Historians still argue whether medieval alchemists genuinely believed in the effectiveness of their beauty treatments or if they were simply taking advantage of wealthy women's desperation for eternal youth. What's clear is that these treatments were incredibly expensive and often required multiple sessions, suggesting that either they worked or people were very good at convincing themselves they worked. The equipment used in alchemical beauty treatments was as dangerous as the ingredients. Heated metal applicators were used to apply various treatments directly to the skin, often causing severe burns that were considered part of the beautification process. The theory was that you had to destroy the old, imperfect skin to make way for the new, perfect skin that would emerge from the alchemical treatment. One particularly popular alchemical beauty treatment involved the use of aquavita, a highly concentrated alcohol that was believed to be the elixir of life. Women would drink small amounts of this substance and also apply it directly to their skin, believing that it would preserve their youth and beauty. The alcohol content was so high that it often caused alcohol poisoning, but the temporary flushed complexion it produced was considered worth the risk. Here's a quirky detail about medieval alchemical beauty. Many treatments were performed during specific astrological alignments, because alchemists believed that the position of the planets affected the potency of their preparations. Venus had to be in the right house, the moon had to be waxing, and Mercury couldn't be in retrograde, because, apparently, even medieval beauty treatments were subject to astrological drama. The creation of alchemical beauty treatments was an incredibly complex process that could take weeks or even months to complete. Ingredients had to be purified through multiple distillations, metals had to be heated to specific temperatures, and everything had to be combined in precise proportions during exact astrological conditions. The fact that people were willing to wait months for a single beauty treatment shows just how seriously they took their appearance. Some alchemical beauty treatments involved the use of human remains, specifically the ground bones and teeth of young people who had died in their prime. The theory was that these remains still contained the essence of youth and beauty, which could be transferred to the living through topical application. The logistics of obtaining these ingredients were, well, let's just say that medieval grave robbing wasn't always about treasure. The side effects of alchemical beauty treatments were often worse than the original problems they were meant to solve. Mercury poisoning caused hair loss, tooth loss, and neurological damage. Lead poisoning caused anemia, kidney damage, and eventually death. But these symptoms often took months or years to develop, so people didn't always connect them to their beauty treatments. You're starting to realize that medieval, alchemical beauty was less about actual chemistry and more about elaborate placebo effects combined with slow poisoning. But in a world where scientific understanding was limited and the pressure to be beautiful was enormous, these treatments represented the cutting edge of beauty technology, if that edge was sharp enough to kill you. You enter the private chambers of a medieval court, where the air is thick with incense and the soft murmur of prayers. But this isn't a religious service, it's beauty time, and you're about to witness how medieval people believed that spiritual purity and physical beauty were so intertwined that achieving one required elaborate religious rituals that would make modern spa treatments look absolutely mundane. The medieval church had a complicated relationship with beauty and vanity. On one hand, excessive concern with physical appearance was considered sinful pride. On the other hand, physical beauty was seen as a reflection of spiritual purity, creating a paradox that medieval women navigated through elaborate beauty rituals disguised as religious observances. One of the most mainstream religious beauty practices was the purification fast, where women would abstain from food for days or even weeks before important social events, believing that internal cleansing would result in external radiance. These weren't just casual diets, they were serious spiritual undertakings that often resulted in the kind of gaunt, ethereal appearance that was considered the pinnacle of medieval beauty. The fasting process was incredibly dangerous, especially when combined with the various toxic beauty treatments we've already discussed. Women who were already weakened by mercury poisoning and lead-based makeup would then deprive themselves of nutrition for extended periods, creating a perfect storm of health problems that often proved fatal. But the resulting hollow-cheeked, otherworldly appearance was considered so beautiful that many felt the risk was worthwhile. Here's where medieval religious beauty gets really strange. Many women believed that suffering for beauty was actually a form of religious devotion. The pain of plucking every hair from their bodies, the agony of applying caustic chemicals to their skin, and the weakness from extended fasting were all seen as forms of penance that would bring them closer to God while making them more beautiful. This concept of beautiful suffering led to some truly bizarre practices. Women would wear hair shirts, rough, uncomfortable garments made from animal hair under their clothing, believing that the constant irritation would purify their souls and improve their complexions. The logic was that external discomfort would drive out internal impurities, resulting in clearer, more radiant skin. Historians still argue whether these religious beauty practices were genuine expressions of faith or elaborate justifications for vanity. What's clear is that they provided a socially acceptable way for women to pursue beauty in a culture that officially condemned vanity as sinful. The timing of religious beauty rituals was crucial and incredibly complex. Different treatments had to be performed during specific religious seasons, on particular saints' days, and at exact times of day that corresponded to various prayers. Missing the proper timing could supposedly negate the treatment's effectiveness and might even be considered sacrilegious. One particularly popular religious beauty practice was the Virgin's Vigil, where unmarried women would stay awake all night praying while applying various beauty treatments. The theory was that the combination of spiritual devotion and sleep deprivation would create a kind of transcendent state that would enhance the effectiveness of whatever toxic substances they were rubbing on their faces. Here's a quirky detail about medieval religious beauty. Many convents actually specialized in creating beauty treatments for wealthy patrons. Nuns, who were supposed to have renounced worldly vanity, became some of the most skilled cosmetic chemists of their time. They justified this by claiming that they were helping women achieve the physical perfection that reflected spiritual purity, a convenient rationalization that also brought in significant income for their religious communities. The use of holy water in beauty treatments was incredibly common, but not in the way you might think. Instead of simply blessing regular water, medieval people believed that water had to be blessed during specific religious ceremonies to be truly effective for beauty purposes. Some women would travel hundreds of miles to obtain water that had been blessed by particularly holy individuals, believing that the spiritual power of the blessing would transfer to their skin. Religious relics were also incorporated into beauty treatments in ways that would horrify modern believers. Ground-up pieces of saints' bones were mixed into face powders, threads from saints' clothing were woven into hair treatments, and even dust from holy shrines was incorporated into various cosmetic preparations. The belief was that the sanctity of these objects would purify and beautify whoever used them. The confession booth became an unlikely center of beauty advice, as women would confess their vanity to priests while seeking guidance on how to pursue beauty without committing the sign of pride. This led to the development of elaborate theological justifications for various beauty practices, creating a whole branch of medieval theology devoted to the spiritual implications of cosmetics. Some religious beauty treatments involved group rituals that resembled pagan ceremonies more than Christian observances. Groups of women would gather in churches or chapels to perform synchronized beauty treatments while chanting prayers, creating scenes that must have been absolutely surreal to witness. These group sessions were believed to amplify the spiritual power of the treatments. Through collective faith, you're beginning to see how medieval people managed to pursue extreme beauty practices while maintaining their religious convictions by convincing themselves that physical beauty was actually a form of spiritual devotion. This mental gymnastics allowed them to justify the most dangerous and bizarre treatments as acts of faith rather than vanity. You find yourself in the bustling marketplace of a medieval town, where the air is filled with the calls of vendors hawking their beauty wares. But these aren't the clean, regulated cosmetics you might expect. These are mysterious concoctions, sold by traveling merchants who claim their products can grant eternal youth, perfect skin, and irresistible beauty. Welcome to the Wild West of medieval cosmetics commerce, where buyer beware was more than just a saying. It was a matter of survival. The medieval beauty market was a fascinating blend of legitimate herbal remedies and outright fraud, with very little regulation to distinguish between the two. Traveling merchants would arrive in towns with wagons full of exotic ingredients and wild claims about their effectiveness, creating a medieval version of the modern cosmetics industry, except with significantly more chance of death from the products. One of the most mainstream medieval beauty products was Venice treacle, a supposed miracle cure that claimed to treat everything from wrinkles to plague. The recipe was supposedly a closely guarded secret from Venice, but in reality, most versions were just honey mixed with various herbs and a healthy dose of whatever toxic metals the merchant had on hand. The exotic name and mysterious origins made it incredibly popular, despite the fact that it often made people sicker than it made them beautiful. The beauty market was also flooded with products claiming to contain rare and expensive ingredients that were actually cheap substitutes. Unicorn horn powder was usually ground deer antler. Dragon's blood was typically tree resin mixed with red dye. And mermaid scales were often just fish scales that had been treated with various chemicals to make them shimmer. The fact that people believed in these ingredients shows just how desperate they were for effective beauty treatments. Here's where the medieval beauty market gets really weird. There was a thriving trade in human-derived beauty products. Merchants would sell virgins' tears, usually just salt water, maiden's breath captured in bottles and sold as a skin toner, and even youth essence supposedly extracted from young people through mysterious processes. The logistics of collecting and preserving these products were never explained, but customers didn't seem to care as long as the results were promised. The pricing of medieval beauty products was absolutely astronomical, often costing more than a family's annual income. A single jar of philosopher's cream could cost as much as a small farm, and women would literally bankrupt themselves pursuing the perfect complexion. This created a secondary market in counterfeit beauty products, where unscrupulous merchants would sell cheap imitations of expensive treatments to customers who couldn't afford the real thing. Historians still argue whether the high prices of medieval beauty products were due to the actual cost of exotic ingredients, or if merchants were simply taking advantage of women's desperation for beauty. What's clear is that the beauty market was incredibly lucrative, attracting merchants from across Europe and even from as far away as Asia and Africa. The seasonal nature of the medieval beauty market created its own unique challenges. Many beauty ingredients could only be harvested at specific times of year, leading to boom and bust cycles in the cosmetics trade. Spring brought fresh herbs and flowers. Summer provided exotic imports from distant lands. And winter was the time for preserved and processed beauty products that had been prepared months in advance. One particularly popular category of medieval beauty products was transformation creams that claimed to completely change a person's appearance overnight. These products promised to turn dark hair blonde, brown eyes blue, and aged skin young again. Of course, none of them actually worked, but the marketing was so convincing that people would travel hundreds of miles to purchase them from specific merchants who had built reputations as miracle workers. Here's a quirky detail about the medieval beauty market. Many products were sold with elaborate backstories about their origins. Merchants would spin tales of dangerous journeys to exotic lands, battles with mythical creatures, and secret formulas passed down through generations of ancient beauty masters. These stories were often more valuable than the actual products, as customers were buying into the fantasy as much as the cosmetics. The regulation of medieval beauty products was virtually non-existent, leading to a market flooded with dangerous and ineffective treatments. There were no safety standards, no ingredient lists, and no way for customers to know what they were actually buying. This led to countless cases of poisoning, disfigurement, and death from beauty products. But the lack of communication between distant towns meant that dangerous merchants could simply move on to new markets when their products started killing people. The medieval beauty market also had a thriving underground economy of illegal and forbidden products. Items that were banned by the church or considered too dangerous even by medieval standards were sold in secret, often at night markets or through coded messages. These black market beauty products were usually the most toxic and dangerous, but they were also considered the most effective by desperate customers. Some medieval beauty merchants specialized in bespoke treatments, creating custom formulations for wealthy clients based on their specific needs and desires. These personalized beauty treatments were incredibly expensive and often involved multiple consultations, detailed examinations of the client's skin and hair, and elaborate preparation rituals that could take weeks to complete. The competition between medieval beauty merchants was fierce and sometimes violent. Merchants would sabotage each other's products, spread rumors about competitors' treatments, and even hire thugs to intimidate rival sellers. The beauty market was serious business, and merchants would go to extreme lengths to protect their territories and customer bases. You're starting to understand that the medieval beauty market was like the Wild West of cosmetics, lawless frontier, where anything could be sold to anyone willing to pay the price. The combination of desperate customers, unscrupulous merchants, and complete lack of regulation created a perfect storm of beauty-related chaos that makes modern cosmetics controversies look absolutely tame by comparison. You step into the private quarters of a medieval castle, where servants are preparing their mistress for what they call the transformation. But this isn't a gentle makeover, this is medieval makeup application, a process so complex and dangerous that it requires multiple assistants, specialized tools that look more like surgical instruments, and enough toxic substances to stock a modern hazmat facility. The application of medieval makeup wasn't something you did quickly before heading out the door. This was an elaborate ritual that could take hours to complete and required the kind of precision usually reserved for religious ceremonies or military operations. One wrong move could result in permanent disfigurement, blindness, or death. No pressure there. The first step in medieval makeup application was the preparation of the face, which involved scraping away any existing makeup with sharp metal tools. Since most medieval makeup was made with lead, mercury, and other substances that essentially welded themselves to the skin, removal was a painful and dangerous process that often left the face raw and bleeding. But hey, you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, or, in this case, you can't achieve perfect beauty without scraping off a few layers of skin. One of the mainstream medieval makeup techniques was the application of white lead foundation. Using brushes made from human hair, the hair had to come from young virgins because it was believed to be the purest and would therefore create the most flawless application. The brushes themselves were incredibly expensive and were often passed down through generations like family heirlooms, accumulating decades worth of toxic residue in the process. The precision required for medieval makeup application was absolutely incredible. Eyebrows had to be completely removed with heated tweezers, hairlines had to be plucked back to exact specifications, and the white lead foundation had to be applied in perfectly even layers without any streaks or patches. A single mistake could ruin the entire look and require starting the process over from the beginning. Here's where medieval makeup gets really weird. The application process often involved multiple people working simultaneously on different parts of the face. One servant would be applying foundation while another worked on hair removal, and a third prepared the various toxic substances needed for the next steps. It was like a medieval assembly line of beauty, except the end product might kill you. The tools used for medieval makeup application were genuinely terrifying. Heated metal rods for curling eyelashes, sharp knives for precise hair removal, and brushes made from exotic animal hair that had been treated with various chemicals to achieve the right texture. Many of these tools were also used for medical procedures, which tells you something about the medieval approach to beauty. It was basically considered a form of surgery. Historians still argue whether the elaborate medieval makeup application process was necessary for achieving the desired look, or if it was simply a way to demonstrate wealth and status through conspicuous consumption of time and resources. What's clear is that only the very wealthy could afford to spend hours each day on their makeup routine. The timing of medieval makeup application was crucial and incredibly complex. Different layers had to be applied at specific intervals to allow for proper drying and setting, and the entire process had to be timed around meals, prayers, and other daily activities. Some women would begin their makeup routine before dawn and not finish until well into the afternoon. One particularly dangerous aspect of medieval makeup application was the use of live flames to heat various tools and set certain products. Candles and oil lamps were used to warm metal applicators, melt wax-based products, and create the precise temperatures needed for different techniques. The combination of open flames and highly flammable beauty products led to countless accidents, including women literally catching fire during their beauty routines. Here's a quirky detail about medieval makeup application. Many women employed professional makeup tasters who would test each product before it was applied to ensure it wasn't too toxic. These brave individuals would literally taste lead-based foundations, mercury-infused rouge, and other poisonous substances to determine their safety levels. It was like having a food taster, except instead of testing for poison in your dinner, they were testing the poison you planned to put on your face. The removal of medieval makeup at the end of the day was often more dangerous than the application process. The toxic substances had to be scraped off with metal tools, dissolved with caustic chemicals, or sometimes literally burned off with heated implements. Many women would go to bed with their faces covered in open wounds from the makeup removal process, only to repeat the entire cycle the next day. Some medieval makeup techniques required the use of live animals during application. Small birds were sometimes used to apply delicate touches of color to the lips and cheeks, their tiny beaks providing the precision needed for intricate designs. Fish were occasionally used to apply shimmer to the eyelids, their scales creating a subtle sparkle effect that was considered highly fashionable. The psychological pressure associated with medieval makeup application was enormous. Women knew that a single mistake could result in social ostracism, failed marriage prospects, or even accusations of witchcraft if their appearance was too unnatural. The stakes were so high that many women would practice their makeup techniques for years before attempting to appear in public. You're beginning to realize that medieval makeup application wasn't just about looking good. It was about surviving a daily ritual that was equal parts art form, religious ceremony, and extreme sport. The fact that women were willing to undergo this dangerous and time-consuming process every single day shows just how important physical appearance was in medieval society. You find yourself in the medieval equivalent of a beauty salon, except instead of relaxing spa music and cucumber water, you're surrounded by the screams of women undergoing beautification procedures and the acrid smell of burning hair and flesh. Welcome to medieval body modification, where the pursuit of the perfect figure involved techniques that would make modern plastic surgeons run away in horror. Medieval body modification wasn't just about changing your appearance, it was about literally reshaping your body to conform to beauty standards that were often physically impossible to achieve naturally. The lengths that medieval women went to alter their bodies make modern cosmetic surgery look like a gentle massage by comparison. One of the most mainstream medieval body modification practices was waist binding, which involved wrapping the torso in tight bands of cloth or leather to create an impossibly small waist. This wasn't just wearing a corset, this was binding the waist so tightly that it actually deformed the ribcage and internal organs over time. Women would begin this process in childhood, gradually tightening the bindings as they grew to achieve that coveted hourglass figure. The waist binding process was incredibly dangerous and often fatal. The constant pressure on the internal organs caused breathing difficulties, digestive problems, and circulation issues that could lead to gangrene and death. But the resulting tiny waist was considered so beautiful that many women felt the risks were worthwhile, assuming they survived long enough to enjoy their new figure. Here's where medieval body modification gets really disturbing. Foot binding wasn't just practiced in China. European women had their own version, involving the deliberate breaking and reshaping of toes to create smaller, more delicate-looking feet. The process involved breaking the smaller toes and binding them under the foot, creating a permanently deformed but supposedly more attractive foot shape. The medieval obsession with pale skin extended to body modification techniques that would permanently lighten the skin tone. Women would undergo procedures involving the application of caustic chemicals that would literally burn away the top layers of skin, revealing the lighter skin underneath. The process was incredibly painful and often resulted in permanent scarring, but the resulting pale complexion was considered worth the agony. Historians still argue whether these extreme body modification practices were voluntary choices or social pressures that left women with no real alternatives. What's clear is that the beauty standards of the time were so rigid that many women felt they had no choice but to undergo these dangerous procedures to have any hope of marriage or social acceptance. The modification of facial features was also common, involving procedures that would make modern cosmetic surgery look conservative. Women would have their noses reshaped using crude surgical techniques, their lips enlarged or reduced using various cutting and stretching methods, and their ears pinned back or reshaped to achieve the perfect profile. One particularly popular medieval body modification was the artificial creation of dimples through a process that involved piercing the cheeks with heated needles and then maintaining the holes with small plugs until they healed into permanent dimples. The procedure was incredibly painful and often led to serious infections. But dimples were considered so attractive that many women were willing to risk their lives to get them. Here's a quirky detail about medieval body modification. Many procedures were performed by the same people who worked as barbers, blacksmiths, or animal veterinarians. There were no specialized plastic surgeons, so women had to rely on whoever had the steadiest hands and the sharpest tools. The results were often, well, let's just say that medieval body modification had a very high failure rate. The tools used for medieval body modification were essentially torture devices repurposed for beauty. Heated metal rods for reshaping cartilage, sharp knives for cutting and reshaping tissue, and various clamps and vices for holding body parts in place during procedures. The fact that these tools were often borrowed from blacksmith shops or torture chambers tells you everything you need to know about the medieval approach to cosmetic surgery. The recovery process from medieval body modification was often worse than the procedure itself, with no understanding of infection control or proper wound care. Many women developed serious complications that could take months to heal if they healed at all. The mortality rate from these procedures was incredibly high. But the social pressure to conform to beauty standards was so intense that women continued to risk their lives for the chance at physical perfection. Some medieval body modification techniques involved the permanent alteration of posture and movement. Women would have their shoulder blades bound together to force them into a specific posture, or their ankles modified to create a particular way of walking that was considered graceful and attractive. These modifications often left women partially disabled, but the resulting appearance was considered worth the loss of mobility. The psychological impact of medieval body modification was enormous. Women who underwent these procedures often experienced chronic pain, disability, and disfigurement, but they were expected to present themselves as perfectly beautiful and completely comfortable with their modified bodies. The disconnect between the reality of their physical condition and the social expectation of effortless beauty must have been incredibly difficult to navigate. You're starting to understand that medieval body modification wasn't just about changing your appearance, it was about demonstrating your commitment to beauty standards that were literally impossible to achieve without permanent physical alteration. The fact that women were willing to undergo these dangerous and disfiguring procedures shows just how powerful the social pressure for physical perfection was in medieval society. You enter a medieval castle's private chambers during what the inhabitants call the monthly ritual. But this isn't about religious observance, it's about the elaborate beauty treatments that medieval women underwent during their menstrual cycles, based on beliefs about the mystical properties of menstrual blood that would make modern gynecologists question everything they know about reproductive health. Medieval understanding of women's reproductive cycles was a fascinating blend of medical observation and complete superstition, leading to beauty treatments that were based on the belief that menstrual blood contained powerful magical properties that could enhance beauty, restore youth, and even grant supernatural attractiveness to those brave enough to use it. One of the most mainstream medieval beliefs was that menstrual blood was the most potent beauty ingredient available, containing the essence of feminine power and fertility. Women would collect their own menstrual blood and use it as a face mask, believing that it would restore youthful appearance and prevent aging. The practice was so common that there were detailed instructions for proper collection, storage, and application techniques. The use of menstrual blood in beauty treatments wasn't limited to the woman producing it. There was actually a thriving market in virgin's blood and maiden's essence, where young women would sell their menstrual blood to older women who believed that the youth and purity of the donor would transfer to the user. The logistics of this trade were, well, let's just say that medieval commerce had some very unusual specialties. Here's where medieval menstrual beauty gets really strange. Different phases of the menstrual cycle were believed to produce blood with different properties. First day blood was considered the most powerful for anti-aging treatments. Mid-cycle blood was thought to be best for skin brightening. And the final days were believed to produce blood that could enhance fertility and attractiveness to potential mates. The preparation of menstrual blood for beauty treatments involved elaborate rituals that resembled alchemical procedures more than medical practices. The blood had to be collected in specific types of containers, mixed with precise combinations of herbs and minerals, and aged for exact periods of time to achieve maximum potency. Some recipes called for the blood to be buried in the ground during specific lunar phases to enhance its magical properties. Historians still argue whether these menstrual blood beauty treatments were based on genuine belief in their effectiveness, or if they were elaborate placebo rituals that provided psychological comfort to women dealing with the challenges of medieval life. What's clear is that these practices were incredibly widespread and were considered completely normal by medieval standards. The timing of menstrual beauty treatments was incredibly important and had to be coordinated with various astronomical and religious events. The most powerful treatments could only be performed during new moons, on specific saints' days, or during particular seasons of the year. Missing the proper timing could supposedly negate the treatment's effectiveness or even make it dangerous to use. One particularly popular menstrual beauty treatment was the creation of moon water, which involved mixing menstrual blood with water that had been exposed to moonlight for specific periods of time. The resulting liquid was used as a skin toner and was believed to grant the user an otherworldly, ethereal beauty that would make them irresistible to potential romantic partners. Here's a quirky detail about medieval menstrual beauty. Many treatments involved the participation of multiple women, creating group rituals where women would share their menstrual blood and perform synchronized beauty treatments. These gatherings were part medical procedure, part religious ceremony, and part social bonding experience, creating a unique form of medieval female community. The storage and preservation of menstrual blood for beauty purposes required specialized knowledge and equipment. The blood had to be kept at specific temperatures, protected from light and air, and treated with various preservatives to prevent spoilage. Some women employed professional blood keepers, who specialized in maintaining collections of menstrual blood for beauty purposes. The application of menstrual blood beauty treatments was just as elaborate as their preparation. The blood had to be applied in specific patterns, at exact temperatures, and while reciting particular incantations or prayers. Some treatments required the user to remain motionless for hours while the blood dried and was absorbed by the skin, creating meditation-like experiences that were part of the beauty ritual. Some medieval menstrual beauty treatments involved combining the blood with other bodily fluids to create more complex preparations. Tears, saliva, and even breast milk were mixed with menstrual blood to create specialized treatments for different beauty concerns. The resulting concoctions were often incredibly foul-smelling and unpleasant to use, but they were considered the most effective beauty treatments available. The social aspects of menstrual beauty treatments were complex and often contradictory. While menstruation was generally considered shameful and unclean by medieval society, the use of menstrual blood for beauty purposes was widely accepted and even encouraged. This created a strange dynamic where women's reproductive functions were simultaneously stigmatized and celebrated. Depending on the context, you're beginning to see how medieval people managed to turn even the most basic biological functions into elaborate beauty rituals. The fact that menstrual blood was considered a valuable beauty ingredient shows just how desperate medieval women were for effective treatments, and how willing they were to use literally any substance that might improve their appearance. You find yourself in a medieval monastery's scriptorium, but instead of monks copying religious texts, you're watching them carefully transcribe beauty recipes that have been passed down through generations of women who risked everything for the perfect appearance. These aren't just casual beauty tips. These are detailed instructions for procedures so dangerous that they come with their own last rites. The documentation of medieval beauty practices reveals a sophisticated understanding of the risks involved, with detailed warnings about potential side effects, antidotes for common poisonings, and even instructions for what to do if a beauty treatment goes fatally wrong. The fact that these warnings were necessary tells you everything you need to know about the dangers of medieval beauty culture. One of the most mainstream documented beauty practices was the use of aquatofana, a clear, colorless liquid that was supposedly a miracle beauty treatment but was actually a deadly poison made from arsenic, lead, and belladonna. The recipe was carefully guarded and passed down through generations of women, along with detailed instructions for its use and warnings about its lethal properties. The documentation process for beauty recipes was incredibly complex, involving coded language and secret symbols to prevent the recipes from falling into the wrong hands. Many beauty treatments were considered so dangerous that they could only be shared between trusted family members or close friends, creating a kind of underground network of beauty knowledge that operated parallel to official medical practices. Here's where medieval beauty documentation gets really fascinating. Many recipes included detailed astrological charts and timing instructions that had to be followed precisely for the treatments to work safely. The position of the planets, the phase of the moon, and even the time of day could supposedly affect the potency and safety of various beauty treatments, creating a complex system of celestial beauty timing. The preservation of beauty knowledge was considered so important that many wealthy families employed professional scribes, whose only job was to copy and maintain their collections of beauty recipes. These weren't casual hobby collections, they were serious libraries of cosmetic knowledge that were passed down through generations like precious heirlooms. Historians still argue whether the elaborate documentation of medieval beauty practices was necessary for safety reasons, or if it was simply a way to make common treatments seem more mysterious and valuable. What's clear is that the written records reveal a level of sophistication in medieval beauty culture that is often overlooked by modern historians. The translation of beauty recipes between different languages and cultures created its own set of problems. Ingredients that were common in one region might be completely unknown in another, leading to dangerous substitutions and misunderstandings. Some recipes were so poorly translated that they became completely different treatments with entirely different risks and effects. One particularly well-documented medieval beauty practice was the creation of virgin's complexion water, which required a complex process involving the distillation of various flowers, herbs, and bodily fluids over a period of several months. The complete recipe filled several pages of detailed instructions and included warnings about each step of the process. Here's a quirky detail about medieval beauty documentation. Many recipes included personal testimonials from women who had used the treatments, complete with detailed descriptions of their results and any side effects they experienced. These testimonials read like medieval Yelp reviews, except instead of complaining about bad service, they're describing permanent disfigurement and near-death experiences. The organization of medieval beauty knowledge was surprisingly systematic, with treatments categorized by body part, season of use, social class of the intended user, and level of danger involved. The most dangerous treatments were often marked with special symbols or written in different colored inks to warn users about their potentially lethal effects. Some medieval beauty manuscripts included detailed anatomical drawings showing exactly where and how various treatments should be applied. These illustrations were often incredibly detailed and accurate, suggesting that medieval people had a better understanding of human anatomy than is commonly believed, at least when it came to beauty applications. The copying and preservation of beauty manuscripts was a dangerous job in itself, as scribes were often exposed to toxic fumes from the inks and preservatives used in the documentation process. Many professional beauty scribes developed chronic health problems from their work, but the knowledge they preserved was considered too valuable to abandon. The authentication of beauty recipes was a serious concern, as counterfeit treatments could be even more dangerous than the originals. Scribes developed elaborate verification systems involving watermarks, special inks, and coded signatures to ensure that recipes couldn't be forged or altered by unscrupulous individuals. Some medieval beauty manuscripts were considered so valuable that they were kept in locked chests and only brought out for special occasions. The knowledge they contained was literally worth more than gold, and families would go to great lengths to protect their beauty secrets from theft or copying by rivals. You're starting to understand that medieval beauty culture wasn't just about looking good, it was about preserving and transmitting dangerous knowledge that could mean the difference between social success and complete ostracism. The careful documentation of these practices shows that medieval people were well aware of the risks they were taking, but they considered the potential rewards worth the danger. You step into the medieval equivalent of a beauty emergency room, where physicians trained in the dangerous art of cosmetic medicine attempt to save the lives of women whose pursuit of beauty has gone horribly wrong. The air is filled with the moans of patients suffering from mercury poisoning, lead toxicity, and chemical burns, while doctors work frantically to counteract the effects of beauty treatments that have turned deadly. Medieval medicine's approach to beauty-related injuries was a fascinating blend of genuine medical knowledge and complete guesswork, creating treatments for cosmetic disasters that were often more dangerous than the original beauty procedures. Doctors had to develop specialized expertise in treating conditions that didn't exist anywhere else in medical practice. After all, where else would you encounter patients who had voluntarily poisoned themselves with lead and mercury for the sake of appearance? One of the most common beauty-related medical emergencies was acute mercury poisoning from makeup use. The mainstream treatment involved inducing vomiting with various herbal preparations, followed by the administration of milk and egg whites to supposedly neutralize the mercury in the patient's system. Of course, this treatment was largely ineffective against mercury poisoning, but it was the best medieval medicine had to offer. The symptoms of chronic beauty product poisoning were often mistaken for other conditions, leading to misdiagnoses and inappropriate treatments that made the situation worse. Hair loss from lead poisoning was often treated as a curse or supernatural affliction. Neurological symptoms from mercury exposure were attributed to hysteria or demonic possession, and skin damage from caustic chemicals was sometimes treated as leprosy. Here's where medieval beauty medicine gets really disturbing. Many physicians actually encouraged the use of dangerous beauty treatments, believing that the temporary improvement in appearance was worth the long-term health risks. Some doctors even developed their own lines of cosmetic treatments, creating a medieval version of the medical beauty complex that put profits over patient safety. The treatment of chemical burns from beauty products was particularly brutal, involving the application of more caustic substances to supposedly neutralize the original chemicals. Patients who had burned their faces with acid-based skin treatments would then have their wounds treated with lime, salt, or other substances that often made the damage worse rather than better. Historians still argue whether medieval physicians genuinely believed in the effectiveness of their beauty-related treatments, or if they were simply taking advantage of desperate patients who had nowhere else to turn. What's clear is that the medical profession was deeply involved in the medieval beauty industry, often making the situation worse rather than better. The development of antidotes for beauty product poisoning was a major focus of medieval medical research. Physicians experimented with various combinations of herbs, minerals, and animal products to create treatments that could counteract the effects of lead, mercury, and other toxic beauty ingredients. Most of these antidotes were completely ineffective, but they represented genuine attempts to address a serious public health problem. One particularly popular medieval medical treatment for beauty-related injuries was bloodletting, which was believed to remove toxins from the body by draining contaminated blood. Patients suffering from cosmetic poisoning would have large amounts of blood removed, often weakening them further and making recovery even more difficult. Here's a quirky detail about medieval beauty medicine. Many physicians specialized in treating specific types of beauty-related injuries. There were doctors who focused exclusively on mercury poisoning, others who specialized in chemical burns, and some who dealt only with the infections and complications that arose from primitive cosmetic surgery procedures. The documentation of beauty-related medical cases was incredibly detailed, with physicians keeping careful records of symptoms, treatments, and outcomes. These medical records provide some of the best evidence we have about the actual effects of medieval beauty practices, revealing the true cost of the pursuit of perfect appearance. Some medieval physicians developed elaborate theories about the relationship between beauty and health, arguing that true beauty could only be achieved through proper medical treatment rather than dangerous cosmetic procedures. These doctors promoted alternative beauty treatments based on diet, exercise, and herbal medicine, but their approaches were often ignored in favor of more dramatic, cosmetic interventions. The training of physicians in beauty-related medicine was incredibly specialized and dangerous. Medical students had to learn to recognize the symptoms of dozens of different types of poisoning, understand the effects of various caustic chemicals on human tissue, and develop techniques for treating injuries that were unlike anything else. In medical practice, the mortality rate from beauty-related medical emergencies was incredibly high, with many patients dying from complications that arose weeks or months after their initial cosmetic treatments. The delayed nature of many beauty-related health problems meant that patients often didn't connect their symptoms to their cosmetic routines, making treatment even more difficult. Some medieval medical texts included detailed warnings about the dangers of popular beauty treatments, but these warnings were often ignored by patients who were more concerned with their appearance than their health. The disconnect between medical knowledge and patient behavior created a situation where doctors were constantly treating preventable injuries and illnesses. You're beginning to realize that medieval beauty culture created its own unique category of medical problems that required specialized knowledge and treatment approaches. The fact that an entire branch of medicine developed around treating beauty-related injuries shows just how widespread and dangerous these practices were in medieval society. You find yourself in the shadowy underworld of medieval beauty culture, where the most dangerous and forbidden treatments are practiced in secret by individuals who operate outside the bounds of law, medicine, and social acceptability. These aren't just risky beauty treatments. These are procedures so extreme that they were banned even by medieval standards, creating a black market of beauty services that would make modern underground cosmetic surgery look absolutely tame. The illegal beauty trade in medieval times was a complex network of practitioners who specialized in treatments that were too dangerous, too expensive, or too morally questionable for legitimate beauty providers. These underground beauty experts operated in the shadows, providing services to clients who were willing to risk everything for the chance at supernatural beauty. One of the most notorious illegal beauty practices was the use of human blood in cosmetic treatments, while animal blood was commonly used in legitimate beauty products. Human blood was considered too powerful and dangerous for general use. Underground practitioners would harvest blood from young, healthy individuals and use it to create treatments that supposedly granted eternal youth and irresistible beauty. The procurement of human blood for beauty purposes created its own criminal enterprise, with networks of blood collectors who would target vulnerable individuals, orphans, prisoners, and the desperately poor to harvest their blood for wealthy clients seeking the ultimate beauty treatment. The moral implications of this trade were horrific, but the demand for human blood cosmetics was so high that the practice continued despite official condemnation. Here's where illegal medieval beauty gets really disturbing. Some underground practitioners specialized in treatments that involved the use of human organs and body parts, hearts, livers, and brains from young, attractive individuals, were ground up and used in cosmetic preparations that supposedly transferred the beauty and vitality of the deceased to the living user. The acquisition of human organs for beauty purposes often involved grave robbing, murder, and other serious crimes. Underground beauty practitioners would maintain networks of grave robbers and assassins who would provide fresh organs for their treatments, creating a criminal enterprise that was part beauty salon and part organized crime syndicate. Historians still argue whether these extreme illegal beauty practices were based on genuine belief in their effectiveness, or if they were elaborate scams designed to extract enormous sums of money from desperate clients. What's clear is that the underground beauty trade was incredibly lucrative and attracted some of the most dangerous criminals in medieval society. The secrecy surrounding illegal beauty treatments meant that clients often had no idea what they were actually receiving. Underground practitioners would create elaborate stories about the origins and properties of their treatments, but the reality was often very different from what clients were told. Many people paid fortunes for treatments that were not only ineffective, but actively harmful. One particularly notorious category of illegal beauty treatments involved the use of demonic or supernatural forces to enhance appearance. Practitioners would claim to have made pacts with demons or evil spirits to gain access to otherworldly beauty secrets, charging enormous fees for treatments that supposedly involved supernatural intervention. Here's a quirky detail about illegal medieval beauty. Many underground practitioners were actually legitimate medical professionals who had been expelled from official practice for their dangerous methods. These rogue doctors and apothecaries would continue their work in secret, using their medical knowledge to create treatments that were too extreme for legitimate practice. The locations where illegal beauty treatments were performed were often elaborate and theatrical, designed to convince clients that they were receiving something truly special and powerful. Underground beauty salons were hidden in caves, abandoned buildings, and secret chambers, creating an atmosphere of mystery and danger that enhanced the perceived value of the treatments. The tools and equipment used in illegal beauty treatments were often stolen from legitimate medical practices, religious institutions, and even torture chambers. Underground practitioners would use whatever implements they could acquire to perform their procedures, often with little regard for safety or hygiene. The client base for illegal beauty treatments included some of the most powerful and wealthy individuals in medieval society. Nobles, merchants, and even religious leaders would secretly seek out underground practitioners for treatments that they couldn't obtain through legitimate channels, creating a shadow economy that operated parallel to official beauty culture. The punishment for providing illegal beauty treatments was severe, often involving imprisonment, torture, or execution. However, the enormous profits involved in the underground beauty trade meant that practitioners were willing to risk these punishments for the chance at financial gain. Some illegal beauty treatments involved the use of poisons and toxins that were so dangerous they were banned even for military use. Underground practitioners would experiment with these substances on their clients, often with fatal results, but the promise of supernatural beauty was so appealing that people continued to seek out these treatments despite the obvious risks. You're starting to understand that the illegal medieval beauty trade represented the absolute extreme of the pursuit of perfect appearance. These weren't just dangerous treatments, they were criminal enterprises that preyed on people's desperation for beauty and were willing to commit any crime to provide their services. You enter the final chamber of our medieval beauty journey, where the accumulated wisdom and horror of centuries of dangerous cosmetic practices have created a culture so obsessed with appearance that it has literally reshaped society itself. This is where you witness the ultimate consequences of a civilization that valued beauty above life, creating social structures and cultural norms that would persist for centuries beyond the medieval period. The long-term impact of medieval beauty culture extended far beyond individual health consequences to reshape entire social systems around the pursuit of physical perfection. The enormous resources devoted to dangerous beauty treatments created economic structures that prioritized cosmetic commerce over public health, establishing patterns that would influence European society for generations. One of the most significant mainstream consequences of medieval beauty culture was the development of social hierarchies based entirely on physical appearance. The ability to afford dangerous beauty treatments became a marker of social status, creating a system where your position in society was literally determined by your willingness to risk death for the perfect complexion. The economic impact of medieval beauty culture was staggering, with entire industries built around the production, distribution, and application of toxic cosmetic products. Cities specialized in particular types of beauty ingredients. Trade routes were established to transport exotic cosmetic materials, and fortunes were made and lost in the pursuit of the perfect beauty formula. Here's where the consequences of medieval beauty culture become truly profound. The normalization of suffering for appearance created cultural attitudes about women's bodies and autonomy that would persist for centuries. The idea that physical beauty was worth any sacrifice became so deeply ingrained in European culture that it influenced everything from marriage, customs, to legal systems. The medical consequences of widespread cosmetic poisoning created public health crises that medieval societies were completely unprepared to handle. Entire generations of women suffered from chronic health problems related to beauty product use, creating a population of individuals who were simultaneously considered the most beautiful and the most physically compromised in their societies. Historians still argue whether medieval beauty culture was a cause or a consequence of broader social attitudes about women's roles and value in society. What's clear is that the extreme emphasis on physical appearance both reflected and reinforced cultural beliefs about women's primary purpose being ornamental rather than functional. The environmental impact of medieval beauty culture was also significant, with the demand for exotic ingredients leading to the overharvesting of plants, the depletion of animal populations, and the pollution of water sources with toxic cosmetic waste. Entire ecosystems were disrupted to supply the medieval beauty industry with the materials it needed. The technological innovations driven by medieval beauty culture were remarkable, leading to advances in chemistry, metallurgy, and manufacturing that would have applications far beyond cosmetics. The pursuit of the perfect beauty formula drove scientific experimentation and innovation in ways that more practical concerns often failed to achieve. Here's a fascinating detail about the legacy of medieval beauty culture. Many of the techniques and ingredients that were considered cutting edge in medieval times continued to be used well into the modern era. Lead-based makeup wasn't completely abandoned until the 20th century, and some medieval beauty practices can still be found in traditional cosmetic preparations today. The psychological impact of medieval beauty culture created lasting changes in how people thought about their bodies, their worth, and their relationships with others. The idea that physical appearance was the primary determinant of social value became so deeply embedded in European culture that it influenced art, literature, philosophy, and religion for centuries. The documentation and preservation of medieval beauty knowledge created some of the earliest scientific approaches to cosmetic chemistry. The detailed records of ingredients, procedures, and outcomes laid the groundwork for modern cosmetic science. Even though the original practices were often deadly, the social networks that developed around medieval beauty culture created new forms of community and connection among women. But they also created new forms of competition and conflict. The shared experience of dangerous beauty treatments created bonds between women. But it also established hierarchies based on who was willing to take the greatest risks for appearance. The legal and regulatory responses to medieval beauty culture established precedents for government involvement in cosmetic safety that would evolve into modern consumer protection laws. The recognition that beauty products could be dangerous led to some of the earliest attempts at product regulation and safety oversight. The religious and moral implications of medieval beauty culture created theological debates that would influence Christian doctrine for centuries. The tension between vanity and virtue, between physical beauty and spiritual purity, became central themes in medieval religious thought and continued to influence religious attitudes toward appearance and self-care. As you witness the final consequences of medieval beauty culture, you begin to understand that this wasn't just about cosmetics. It was about the fundamental relationship between individual desire and social control, between personal autonomy and cultural expectations, between the pursuit of beauty and the preservation of life itself. You find yourself at the twilight of our medieval beauty journey, standing in a quiet monastery garden where the last light of day filters through ancient stone arches, casting gentle shadows across herbs that once served both healing and vanity. The air is soft now, carrying only the faint scent of lavender and rosemary, a peaceful contrast to the harsh chemical odors and dangerous fumes that filled the beauty chambers we've visited together. As darkness settles around you, you can almost hear the whispered conversations of medieval women sharing their beauty secrets, their hopes and fears, their willingness to risk everything for the chance at perfect appearance. These weren't just stories of vanity or foolishness, they were tales of human desire, of the lengths people will go to feel beautiful, accepted, and loved in their communities. The medieval pursuit of beauty, with all its dangers and absurdities, reveals something profound about human nature that transcends time and culture. The desire to be beautiful, to be desired, to present our best selves to the world, these impulses drove medieval people to extraordinary lengths, just as they continue to influence us today, though thankfully with far safer methods. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we encountered at the beginning of our journey, or the virgin's tears sold in medieval markets. These practices seem almost quaint now, compared to the mercury face masks and lead-based foundations that slowly poisoned generations of women who simply wanted to feel beautiful. Yet in their desperation and determination, these medieval beauty seekers were not so different from us. They were simply working with the knowledge and materials available to them, however dangerous those might have been. The candlelight flickers lower now, and the voices of the past grow quieter, fading into the gentle rhythm of your breathing. The medieval world of beauty, with all its horrors and wonders, begins to dissolve into the peaceful darkness of sleep. Those brave women who risked everything for perfect skin, who endured unimaginable pain for the ideal silhouette, who trusted in mysterious potions and dangerous procedures, they can rest now. Their stories told, their struggles acknowledged. Let the weight of their experiences settle gently into your mind like dust on an old manuscript, becoming part of the vast library of human knowledge that helps us understand where we've been and how far we've come. The pursuit of beauty continues, but with wisdom gained from those who came before, those who paid the ultimate price for lessons we now carry forward. Close your eyes and let the medieval world fade away, replaced by the comfort of your modern bed, your safe cosmetics, your regulated beauty products that won't slowly poison you over time. Feel grateful for the knowledge that protects you, the science that guides you, the safety standards that ensure your pursuit of beauty enhances rather than endangers your life. The monastery bells ring softly in the distance, marking the end of another day, another story, another journey through the fascinating and frightening world of human vanity and desire. Rest now, knowing that beauty, true beauty, comes not from dangerous potions or painful procedures, but from the peace of understanding, the comfort of safety, and the gentle acceptance of ourselves as we are. Sleep well, dear listener, and dream of simpler times when beauty meant health, when cosmetics meant herbs and flowers, when the most dangerous thing in your beauty routine was perhaps staying up too late, reading about the strange and wonderful ways our ancestors pursued the eternal dream of perfect appearance. The last candle flickers and goes out, leaving only the soft whisper of wind through ancient stones, carrying away the echoes of medieval beauty secrets into the peaceful darkness of night.